Happy to take any questions from members of the media. Yes, sir.
Actually, for both of you, how confident are you as the American president is rewriting the rule book, so to speak, on trade, that the principles of this agreement can be carried out in the future under the new tariff regime?
Look, there are a lot of uncertainties at the moment, a lot of instability, there's no doubt, but this is a stable state. This is a state that thrives on certainty and allows our businesses to do well. And so we look forward to maintaining that status. And when things calm down, and they will eventually, we know that there are businesses that are looking to work across from Illinois to the UK and back, and many of them we met when we were there on our last trip, not to mention the many that are here in the state of Illinois that will continue to be great contributors to our economy.
Governor, what about the nuclear aspect that he spoke about? Republicans and some Democrats signed on to the bill that Susan has to lift the cap from the 300, whatever charge that is.
I think there are three different versions of the bill that you're talking about out there. You've mentioned one of them. But absolutely, we're looking to make sure that the legislature has to do its work on those bills, but we're looking forward to having a bill that comes to my desk that will allow us to expand the options for nuclear in the state of Illinois. But it has to be done in the right way, and I think the legislature and my team are working together to make sure that that happens. Dave.
Thank you, Governor. Thanks for the opportunity. Last week, you were in Mexico and had an online news conference, and after the election, you talked about Elon Musk spending money on races, trying to influence the outcome, supporting candidates with his money, billionaire. Sounds kind of familiar. How come it's okay for him to do it, for you to do it, and not okay for you?
I think you must have misheard me or listening to somebody else, because that is not what I said. What I have said, though, is that Elon Musk got involved in a race in Wisconsin in which he put significant dollars into what I think was destined to be a losing campaign. And importantly, the tide of the political world has been moving against the president and moving against candidates that have been unabashed supporters of the president. And so I think it was a fraught endeavor from the very start. Isabel.
You said in your budget address that if people want money for new programs, they have to give you a list of cuts they'd like to see. Has anyone brought you a list of cuts?
Said it slightly differently, but I appreciate you. Yeah, I mean, what I said was that if you want to add dollars into the budget, you've got to find cuts to match them. So no, people aren't showing up at my door with proposed cuts, but then again, I think they understand that any increases that they're going to propose, whatever it is that I'm signing, we're going to have to make this budget balance. And so, yeah, no, go ahead.
Why do you think no one has approached you with cuts yet?
Oh, I think, as you know, I think there are many members of the legislature who don't want to have to cut any programs and only want to have to add or have the ability to add. So, and I understand the desire to do that, but the reality is what it is. We have to balance the budget in the state. Revenues appear to be as we were expecting they would be, and so we're going to have to, make it all work one way or another, and that means balancing expenditures with the revenues. Yeah.
Are you, with the stock market doing what it's doing, banks predicting high probability of a recession coming up, are you still confident in your budget projections, your revenue projections?
Oh, every day that goes by, it's hard to tell from one day to another. You've seen what Doge proposed, what Elon Musk proposed. We don't know if they're going to be Medicaid cuts, which would have a severe impact on the people of the state and on our budget. So, no, I mean, the level of confidence is not bolstered by what happened over the last week. And I think that what we all understand, I think those who are responsible and want to pass a balanced budget, is that we're going to have to live this, circumstance of the uncertainties of the federal government every day and watch how it turns out. And we're probably going to be living that even through the course of the fiscal year ahead. So it may very well be that we're going to have to come back at some point, depending on what the president does.
So come back in the summer, fall, or whatever, are you going to ask for more latitude in the budget? They used to do, give you a lump sum
no more latitude than in the past. I mean, I think at the moment, we're still working that out, of course, but I think the reality is that this is no doubt one of the most challenging budget years, and it's not because of a lack of revenue. That's not something we're seeing yet. But it is the reality that we just don't know. It's so, I mean, the chaos, that's coming from Washington, D.C. and from the administration in particular. And also, let me add that the Congress seems now maybe willing to put a stop to some of the things that the president is proposing, whereas they didn't for the first couple of months. So again, we're just gonna have to watch and wait. But I will say that there's been pretty good collaboration and communication here in Illinois among leaders, and we're hoping that'll continue because we're all gonna have to work on it together.
Governor, there's a bill out there for Senator Feigenholz that would study the impact of cameras on DuSable Lakeshore Drive because of safety issues. What do you think? Do you support cameras being along DuSable Lakeshore Drive for that reason?
I haven't seen her proposal, to be honest with you, so I'm not sure exactly what the purpose is, but I haven't been opposed to having, for example, for public safety, cameras on our highways, and that's actually brought down crime, as you know, and shootings on the interstates significantly, by the way. I think they're down 72% since we started that program. So, but again, I don't know what it is that she's aiming at with that proposal. Shia.
What steps is Illinois taking to minimize the effects of the tariffs? Or do you have a plan?
Well, we can't, I mean, look, the state of Illinois doesn't have foreign policy or foreign trade policy that's, that can match what the federal government can do. And indeed, I joke sometimes that, our only foreign policy is how we're going to relate to Indiana, Missouri, Wisconsin, and Kentucky, and Iowa. And my concern is to do everything that I can to protect the businesses and the people doing business in the state of Illinois. And I'll use every power that I've got. But again, foreign trade is not one that we have literally on the subject of the taxes, the tariffs that the president is putting on working class people and middle class people. I can't control those things, but we'll do everything we can to protect the people of Illinois from the effects of them to the extent we can.
What kind of specific how to protect business?
Well, part of it is, for example, just looking at, we have international foreign trade zones in the state of Illinois, and the question is, can those be used in some fashion, perhaps to protect some of the businesses that are importing? There are limited abilities to do that, but that's an example of something that we are looking at. Another example is to, think about where there are ways that we might be able to offset some of the impacts. Again, when you're putting 108% tariff on imports from China, for example, that's not something that we could possibly offset, but are there other areas where we could, especially in important industries to the state? Possibly, but again, we have limited resources, we're balancing the budget, important for us to make sure that we don't, overspend or limit the amount of revenue that's coming to the state.
Governor, some House Republicans today said that you were out doing national politics and not focusing on children and developmentally disabled.
That is absolutely insane. Can I just say that when I talk about what's going on in Washington, D.C., it is about protecting Illinois. The President of the United States, actually the Congress, is proposing taking away health care from potentially 1 million people in the state of Illinois. So when I stand up and rail against that, and when I stand up and explain to folks out there that we need to fight to make sure that we're not, that we're not going to be subject to taking away health care from 1 million people, that's because I am deeply concerned about the people of the state of Illinois. I don't think in this circumstance can anybody who holds state office can, not talk about what's going on at the federal level and the impact that it will have on state government and our budget.
Talk about the HRC speech that he gave, that was a couple of weeks ago, and he gave that not too long after Gavin Newsom had Charlie Kirk on his podcast talking about how it's deeply unfair to have trans people playing sports. Now, it seemed like that speech in Los Angeles was kind of a bit of a message to nuisance. My question is, are you trying to form a lane of your own in the party against people like Lucy Bolton's views? And secondly, is that the message that you're sending across the country that Democrats need to be more progressive, not less?
I gave a speech about what I believe. It wasn't aimed at anybody. It wasn't about creating a lane. These are things that I've said here in the state of Illinois. I repeated them in another venue. So I'm, perfectly happy about that. And to the extent people see it as a lane, that's their view. What I believe is fairly straightforward. I don't change that much unless somebody convinces me otherwise about something.
The Democratic frontrunner should believe the things that you believe.
Look, I think we are a party that is, that stands up for working people in the United States. And I think we have a lot of us have very common views about what we ought to be doing about that. I've talked a lot, for example, something that I think most Democrats share, about raising the minimum wage federally, right? $7.25, $14,000 a year. No one individually can live on that, let alone raise a family on it working full time. And so we ought to be raising the minimum wage, protecting Medicaid. Healthcare is hugely important to working people across the United States, not to mention everybody else. We ought to have universal healthcare, and I believe that Democrats commonly believe in that. So we have all these things that we share in common. We ought to be talking about that. I mean, what we're really focused on, a lot of us, is winning in the 2026 elections federally. Because if there's anything that can stop the onslaught of this Trump administration against things that we care about, it will happen in the 2026 elections by taking control of at least one, if not both, houses of Congress.
I just wanted to back up there. Do you think the fever is breaking a little bit for some people that were with the president throughout his first term, early in his second term? But now they may see their 401k going down, prices going to the grocery store. Have you noticed that as you travel the country, travel the state, talking to bigger folks about, I guess, the impact of some of these actions?
Yeah, I think there are two things I'd point out about that are worth noting. One is that many of the people who showed up for the hands-off rallies across the country were Republicans. And when I talk to more and more people, whether I'm talking to them in agricultural, rural areas of our state, or when I talk to veterans, for example, right, who probably percentage-wise, we're talking among those two groups, more Republicans than Democrats, you're hearing a real outcry and deep concern. And many of them are people who went to the polls and voted for Donald Trump in November. And I don't know if I would say they regret it, but they're very upset about what's happening in Washington, D.C. Right now. So that's one piece of it. I think the other is, just take note of the headlines today where you've got Bill Ackman taking on the Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, and you've got Elon Musk taking on Peter Navarro. These are all people within the Trump sphere who are now on top of each other and attacking each other about the policies that Trump is now espousing. And I think that tells you that some ground has shifted here. Something has happened. And I think the something that's happened is that Donald Trump is betraying what people thought he would do for the economy. When he said he was going to lower prices for people on day one, he's doing exactly the opposite. And he's been doing it every day that he's been in office, but especially with the imposition of these new very high tariffs.
Governor, thanks to DCFS issue, and hundreds of underreported deaths, thousands of abuse allegations, the situation at Choke. What's your administration doing about that? It's been 6 years.
There are no underreported deaths. Okay, we have an annual report that comes out. It is done by the IG, right, every year, and you can read about all of those situations. I read that entire report. And and DCFS and I react to that every single year by making changes and adjusting to make sure that we're keeping people safe. And indeed, that is working. So I feel confident that, you know, the allegation that was made by a reporter who doesn't understand the way the system of reporting works in the state of Illinois is just, it was a false, you know, road that he went down. I think he couldn't stop himself by the time he'd written half of it and started learning that he was wrong. Didn't want to pull back on the report. So, I'm sorry.
The homeschooling bill, what are your thoughts on that?
You know, it's still, as you know, it's still being worked on, and I even heard that the sponsor of the bill is adjusting, making some amendments, and I read that she's listening to people on the other side to make some of those changes. So, you know, we'll have to see what comes out. Thank you.